On 3rd and 3, they protect Brady. Scans the field and lets it fly. It's Evans. It's a touchdown.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo! And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. And joining us as well, ladies and gentlemen, former quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, host and analyst over for the VSiN Network, Shaun King. Pleasure to have you back with us. Excited to dive into our topics this week. We're going to be talking a lot about this Buccaneers defense, who have been in the hot seat since Sunday night. 41-31 loss for Tampa Bay against Kansas City on Sunday Night Football. We were able to recap a lot of the game, but now we've had a little more time to take things in, to digest what we saw, to maybe check out a couple of plays a few more times. But Shaun, let's open things up. What are your general thoughts on this Bucs defense, before we really dive in?
Well, the hard thing is not to overreact from week to week in the National Football League. It's a 17-game season. It's so easy to get too high too early or too low too early and forget that most franchises break the season up into quarters. And the Bucs went 2-2 through if you looked at it before the season, a very difficult stretch of games. Like, they haven't really played any patsies. They hadn't gotten the Texans or the Bears or, one of these teams that, they should beat. So when you think about it big picture, at the end of this, 2-2 through this stretch probably is not going to look that bad. Having said that, they got their ass kicked last night. Let's be honest. I mean, it's national TV. Obviously, the Chiefs had a greater sense of urgency. They played with, and this was extremely surprising to me, a much more consistent level of physicality than the Bucs did. I could have understood Mahomes throwing it deep and, guy jumping over a DB's head for a contested catch, but they just lined up and knocked the Bucs front seven around. They forced Levante and Devin to get out of position multiple times in pass defense where they could not secure the tackle after Kelsey and Juju Smith-Schuster and those guys made catches. So I think the Bucs staff got out-coached. I think the Bucs team got taught a valuable lesson that it's different when you're on top of the hill than when you're the person that's climbing up the hill. And so with their success and with the amount of attention that they get, teams are gunning for them. And they're going to have to, raise their level of intensity and attention to detail, if they want to have success. So I'm not overreacting, but you have to call a spade a spade. And yesterday was not fun if you were a fan of the Bucs organization.
Yeah, and the one word you mentioned was intensity, and that's what I really realized very early on in that game last night. That I mentioned it on the post-game show that we did last night after the game. It seemed like the Chiefs just wanted it more. It seemed like they were hungry to go out there and make a statement, and the Bucs just weren't ready for that. And we don't want to make excuses, but the Bucs had a tough week. Having to evacuate to Miami, having to worry about their homes or having to evacuate their pets, their families. It's a tough week. There's distractions involved, but it just seemed like Kansas City was the more focused team, and they were out there to, like I said, try and make a statement to not just the Bucs but to the NFL. It was clear that Kansas City hadn't forgotten about Super Bowl 55. And they wanted to get, their quote unquote revenge against the Bucs there, and they did just that. They really took it to them.
And guys, they had an inconvenient week.
Yeah.
A tough week was people that were in Fort Myers, Sanibel Island.
Yeah, absolutely.
They came back to nothing.
Yeah.
Coach Dungy used to have like this sign that said no excuses, no explanations. And, so I'm not going to give them a crutch to lean on. I'm sure Todd and company don't want a crutch to lean on. And I think they're going to be better for what happened to them on Monday night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, offensive, they stunk it up too. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is the first time that, and see, I always look at things based on how they happen, not at the end of the day what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just look at the raw data, same amount of first downs for both offenses, roughly the same amount of total yardage. But this was the first time where Tom was under duress almost the entire game. We had no answer for the Chiefs' blitz packages.
Yeah, they were blitzing a lot, too.
They were blitzing a lot. They were getting a lot of pressure on him. It looked like our game plan was to push the ball vertically down the field. They weren't going to let that happen. You know, we never really adjusted and went to more of a short passing game until the game was out of hand. So, you know, when being honest, like we didn't do a whole lot on offense either, especially in the first half. And that's been like a consistent reoccurring problem.
Well, and not to beat a dead horse here, but, you know, you talk about the intensity for Kansas City and them coming out of the gate, basically just wanting it more. I mean, how much more deflating of a start can you have than to cough up the ball in the first 6 seconds of the game and basically spot Kansas City a touchdown? You're playing from behind against one of the best offenses in the AFC, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, we know what Pat Mahomes is. We know he's going to find a way, and he certainly did that. But when we look over at this Buccaneers defense and just the amount of yards they gave up, I want to look at the run defense because they did kind of get a break this week as we look ahead to their week 2 opponent their week 5 opponent against Atlanta. Season is actually flying by at this point. But Cordarrelle Patterson was placed on IR, so he's going to miss the next 4 games. He's a top 5 rusher in the NFL, and last night on primetime television, Kansas City put up damn near 200 yards rushing, and that's not even including their running or their quarterback in there as well. So, I mean, this Bucs defense, it's hard to say they got exposed because there's always going to be an outlier game, and for Tampa Bay moving forward, they hope that this is it, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more questions with this defense and how consistent they're going to be moving forward.
Yeah, I think we'll find a lot of that, you know, next week because next week's going to be challenging. Arthur Smith has done a really good job with the scheme in Atlanta. I mean, they're utilizing Mariota in the run game. Like, they're putting your run fits in a pickle. Not having Patterson, I mean, that's a substantial loss. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you want to have a legacy as a great defense, you got to prove it every week. So this will be another opportunity for them to, you know, create a new part of the 2022 resume. I will say this defensively, one of my concerns before the season, guys, and I think we mentioned that on one of the podcasts, was when you lose a Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh, no matter where you think those guys are in their career, they're veteran guys that consume a lot of snaps, and the snaps that they get are executed at a pretty high level. And I think Vita Vea has stepped into that role of playing more snaps extremely well, but Joe Tryon is struggling. I mean, for a guy that was drafted in the first round, who's kind of, you know, supposed to be showing some flashes, and I know it's still early, but I mean, through 4 games, what does he have? 4 tackles, I think, and a half a sack. Pretty non-existent last night, almost invisible. So some of those young guys, you know, it's a huge, you know, transition from playing, you know, 15 snaps a game to playing 60 plus.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of, especially young pass rushers, I think pass rusher can be one of those positions that it takes a little bit of time. And Joe did well in a limited role last year. He wasn't a full-time starter. And I'm still, and I mentioned this last night, I'm still not hitting the panic button on him yet. I like the skill set. This is his first year, you know, being a starter. So yeah, I'm willing to give him a little bit more time to develop, you know, his craft. I think he's got a lot of potential. But I'll tell you what, if the Bucs run defense doesn't clean it up, it doesn't matter that the Falcons will be missing Cordarrelle Patterson, because Tyler Algier, who it was a rookie for the Falcons, he had 10 rushes. Yeah, he had 10 rushes for 84 yards last week against Cleveland. So he's a good player. Like, yeah, Cordarrelle Patterson is a loss, and he does a lot for that Atlanta offense, and we'll get into that later in the week. But that doesn't mean that just okay, oh, the run defense will be fine. Like, no, this run defense needs to be better. And the entire season, it really hasn't been that great. But versus Kansas City, it just seemed like Kansas City was getting 8-7 yards a pop every single time. And it was, I mentioned this last night. The reason Kansas City was so good on third down was because they were in 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 every single time consistently. Offense like Kansas City, you're just not going to be able to get that type of production from your defense if Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes are facing 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, which is it's not going to work.
Hey, even the dog was disgusted at the defensive performance last night against the run game. But I'll say this: the other thing about that, guys, is when you put that on film, now everybody gonna make you prove that that's not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they put that film on and they see you getting pushed around, and every time Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire ran the ball, they fell forward. I mean, they were getting yards after contact. Like, that's the attitude and energy that you're going to get moving forward until you show something different. So, we'll see. Atlanta's better than I anticipated this year. I thought they'd be a dumpster fire, but, I mean, they've been extremely competitive. What are they, 3-1, 2-2?
2-2.
2-2. So
both teams are 2-2.
Basically, and they could very easily be 3-2 because they should have won the Saints game.
Basically, whoever wins the game next week takes the lead in the division, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, whoever wins will take the lead.
Yeah, so just like we drew it up, a Week 5 battle for the NFC South between the Atlanta Falcons, led by Marcus Mariota, and Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, still trying to figure it out on both sides of the ball here. We've talked a lot about the defense, the run defense a little bit as well, and you mentioned the big man playing in the middle of the line. That's Vita Vea. It is no secret at all that, the 350-pounder is a lot of what holds this defensive line together. We spoke to the lack of pressure in the first half against Kansas City on Sunday night, but, I mean, aside from the sack week 1, it kind of feels like we haven't seen the dominant Vita Vea that we have seen these past couple of years. And, yeah, maybe the supporting cast around him has a lot to do with that as well, but do you think he's in a position where he needs to step it up, or do you think he just needs more help?
No, I think Vita Vea's impact can't always be measured statistically.
Mm-hmm.
His job is to command 2 of those guys on the interior or the offensive line so that the ends can get one-on-one matchups. That's what his job is. He collapses the pocket. He kind of solidifies the interior of your, structure defensively, and I think he's doing a good job at that. Now, again, he's a guy that's playing more snaps than he has. So at that size, I don't care what kind of athlete you are, if your production is going to slide generally if your snap count goes up, 20, 25 snaps a game. That's just, in my opinion, what happens because he gets tired. But I think the guys did a terrible job of tackling in space. And I think they did not play with the right kind of physicality at the point of contact. Like, that line of scrimmage moved in the Chiefs' favor on almost every run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And moving over to the offensive side of the ball, because despite, you didn't think the offense was too good, they still had this, most success that they've had this season. They finally scored a first half touchdown, which was something that was mind-boggling that they couldn't even do that in the first 3 games. But and obviously you mentioned Brady under duress with a lot of the Chiefs blitzes, and Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, is notorious for blitzing Brady. He does it a lot, and the Bucs sometimes picked it up, but a lot of the times they didn't. And Luke Gedeke struggled in the interior with a tough assignment against Chris Jones. But as a quarterback, as a guy who played quarterback in the NFL, when you're watching Brady, I thought he played well for the pressure. But what does consistent pressure do to a quarterback during the course of a game?
Well, most defensive coordinators are afraid to blitz Brady because of his intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And they just think that, he'll dissect it, identify it, and burn us. Spagnuolo looks at it as, what is Brady's only significant deficiency? He's immobile.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can make him get off the spot, if I can make him have to throw on the run, if I can get a lot of guys consistently around his body, then hopefully, that makes him miss a couple throws he wouldn't miss. Maybe that gets him frustrated. and that's the approach Spagnuolo takes. And, I think it's a smart approach specifically because of the injuries the Bucs have endured on the offensive line. Because no matter how smart the quarterback is, when he's communicating pass protection adjustments, they still have to be executed by the front five. And with those three interior guys being inexperienced, kind of not necessarily being together for a long period of time, there are probably some mistakes made. And when you're unsure mentally, the first thing that happens is you become passive. If I don't know if I got the 3-tech or the end, if they twist, if the linebacker shoots the A-gap, are we moving to the field blitz? Are we moving to the boundary? And now a little hesitation occurs. And, when you're not the most talented, you're not the most experienced, now that pressure gets magnified. So I think the Bucs are going to see more of that as the season goes on, while people try and test, that offensive line and just see, can they hold up? But, it worked. I thought the one thing that I wish Bayern, would just commit to is, no matter what happens on the scoreboard, continue to run the ball. Because the best thing to gate pressure in the passing game is running the football. When those guys got to, anchor down and, play run defense and be in the right run fit, they can't get vertical all the time on the snap. So I wish we had I think at what we end up with 6 rushing attempts in the whole game. What we have
3
2 at the half or something.
3 for Leonard Fournette, which didn't go anywhere. I think he got negative yardage on the evening, and then Rachaad White came in, also got 3. Between both of those guys, there was 100 yards receiving at the running back position, which was a welcome sight when the Bucs were kind of in hurry up mode. But yeah, 6 rushing attempts for 3 total yards, just abysmal.
And how many of those were on the goal line? I think 4 of those were because Rachaad got
I think Rachaad got 2
on the one where he scored, and I think Leonard had one earlier.
Well, I know for sure. I think all of his were on first down. I think if he got one at the goal line, it must have been on a 1st and goal, maybe a second.
Well, the one he
scored
was from the goal line.
Yeah, the
Rachaad. Remember he jumped over the pile? Yeah.
So
that is probably one thing Byron probably needs to have somebody just tug his belt loop every now and then, because he's a former quarterback. The way the quarterback mind works is they've got deficiencies in the secondary that we can attack. They have a rookie, Jalen Watson. We can go at him, but time of possession comes into play when you're throwing it that much. Defense is on the field a lot more. So I feel like balance is the best way to proceed. And sometimes you forget. You do. You forget.
Well, to me, it's just you would like balance, but I also think the Bucs' strength is the passing game, right? I think that's what this offense is built on. But also, sometimes the score just doesn't allow for that, and that's I do think they should have ran it more than 6 times. But just sometimes they're down the entire game. They're 46 seconds in or they're down.
But the thing with the score, you mentioned they were down the entire game. They were playing catch up. They had to dig themselves out of a hole. But if you take that away, and listen, I don't like to sit here and be the what if guy, but if you take that away, this is a 3-point game at the end of the day, and we're talking about this through a much different lens as to look how much more competitive this game felt, because we talked about it on the post game last night. It didn't even felt like they lost by 10 to Kansas City. It felt like they lost by 25. The way that they played, the costly mistakes that they had exactly when they didn't need them. But offensively, I'm still not super upset. You don't really want Brady throwing the ball 52 times every single week, but they were effective when they needed to be. And aside from that mistake, and then obviously the Brady fumble, you can't get those back, but it's hard to sit here and say that the offense wasn't competitive, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and I'm definitely not saying they weren't competitive. I'm just saying I think for them to win a championship, they're going to have balance. When you look around the National Football League right now, the teams that are really pass heavy have mobile quarterbacks. That can, when things aren't perfect in protection, when things don't develop initially from a scheme standpoint, like Josh Allen, Herbert, those guys can move around, extend the play.
It's the way of the future.
Pick up 2-3 first downs with their feet. They can hide a lot of deficiencies in pass protection. Whereas as great as Tom is, and he's older now, guys. He's not 44-year-old Tom. He's 45-year-old Tom. And the one thing about getting old, it don't give you like an expiration date. You go in the fridge and the milk carton specifically says, okay, October 16th, 2022. Like the old thing just kind of, you get out of bed one day, that back hurt when it didn't used to hurt. You put the cleats on, and the bottom of those feet start feeling a little funny. So I think for the Bucs, the way this roster is constructed, because the play action to me is where the explosive plays can come. Because they have not just dynamic guys on the outside, but they have big guys on the outside. Julio Jones, Mike Evans, those are big guys. But the play action works better when you actually attempt to run the ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're right about the pass rush thing. Kansas City was blitzing so much because they knew the Bucs were in passing situations, and they knew that the Bucs, they could just tee off. That's and that's not putting your offense in a great spot. But I also understand why they threw it so much, because looking at the score, like you kind of had to at some points.
Now, looking at the topic of pass protect as well, the tight ends are going to play a role. Your running back picking stuff up is going to play a role. But we got a question here from our friends over at Bucs UK. Shout out to those guys. This is an interesting question. You kind of mentioned the roster, and I know the importance of execution from your tight ends, from your blockers, your offensive linemen, your front five, and the Bucs are still using some spare parts there. They ask this: do we need to sign a veteran offensive lineman either now or before the end of the season? I know that, pickings are slim, so it's not like the Bucs are going to go out there and get a bona fide starter that's going to take anyone's spot on this line, but maybe from a depth position, do you think there's going to be any need to sign an O-lineman anytime soon?
I personally don't, just because maybe on the interior. I think the tackles, Brandon Walton should be enough to be at least serviceable in a pinch.
Donovan Smith was playing at the level we kind of expected him to last night. I thought he had, didn't hear his name a bunch.
Yeah, and we haven't seen Smith since week 1. So I'm willing to give this offensive line another week or two and see how it looks when it's at full strength, for what full strength is for this team. But like I said, I think Brandon Walton is serviceable, just like Shaun mentioned, last week about how, backups are good in, little increments, right? Not in the long term, but like Brandon Walton can step in and play a few solid snaps for you. Josh Wells can step in and play a few solid snaps for you. It's just when you have to 2, 3, 4 weeks, that's when you run into trouble. But so I'm fine with the tackle depth. And also, just like you mentioned, Rhett, those guys that are on the street right now, they're on the street for a reason.
Hey, trust me, guys, there's probably 3 teams out of 32 that go to bed at night like we straight on the offensive line.
So every team,
it's 29 other offensive line coaches like, man, if I just had 2 more guys. So if they were out there, they would be on the team. So unless they got a CFL player or something that had a great season and just not going for a Grey Cup. I mean, those guys just aren't there. I mean, I can see bringing some bodies in maybe from a practice standpoint if you're trying to take some reps off of some guys, if your numbers get low. But, I mean, with what happened to the Bucs, I always knew that this was going to be an interesting experiment at that particular position. Because, I mean, the Marpet retirement was like all of a sudden. It wasn't something that they could plan for. It kind of just happened. So he's a Pro Bowl guard.
Mm-hmm.
You lose Kappa in free agency, which you prepared for that because you had already made the decision. You knew what the market was based on where we're at roster management-wise, salary cap-wise. Can we pay what he's going to get on the market? Obviously, the answer was no. So you had 2 big weaknesses. Then all of a sudden, you go through all the offseason, you get in the training camp, and you unexpectedly lose Jensen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just not a whole lot. If all those moves happen before the draft, then maybe you can approach the draft in a different way and say this is a major situation that we have to get, fixed with all 3 spots. But with the way, that position's like absentees like unfolded, I mean, what can you do?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Pro Bowl caliber players, so we're not just talking about some guys. So there was going to be a drop off with whoever was actually starting, which means now there's even more significant drop off with whoever will be backing up the guys that are starting.
Yeah, and I think the one that hurts the most is Jensen, because that was the one absolute the whole time. They traded for Shaq Mason to replace Alex Kappa. So that was their plan there. And then they drafted Luke Gedeke, to maybe not be a starter, but to at least compete and see what he could do. Jensen was the one that threw everything off. Jensen being injured really hurt. It's on the second day of training camp, basically out for the season. That's the one that really hurt this team, because the center is the only other guy other than the quarterback who's going to touch the ball on every single play, on every single play. So the center is basically the quarterback of the offensive line. And losing your starting center, who, like you said, is not just an average starting center, is a really, really good starting center, probably a top 3 starting center in the NFL, that hurts. And I think that was the one that kind of threw a lot of this offensive line in flux, because losing your centerpiece like that is definitely something that's going to change the way your offensive line plays and just the tone of your offensive line. You spoke about the physicality earlier and then the intensity. Physicality and intensity are 2 things that Ryan Jensen brings every single game. That was never an issue, and I think the Bucs right now, along both lines, the defensive line and offensive line, are kind of missing that right now. And I think they're feeling the effects of not having a guy like Ndamukong Suh on the defensive line, and then not having a guy like Ryan Jensen available on the offensive line.
And then look at it like this. I guess my last point, the offensive line. If you're going to give them a grade for the year, remember, we're just in the first couple chapters, couple questions on the test. So the hope is that by the time we get to week 13, 14, we make that last run, guys like Luke Gedeke, Shaq Mason, those guys, they're a cohesive unit now, and they're all on the same page, and we're getting ready to be whatever their best is, we're going to get ready to get it down the last stretch. That would be my hope.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to our next question here, let's talk about the tight end room, because we had talked about the first few weeks of the season, just the lack of production. The drop-off from a first-ballot Hall of Famer and Rob Gronkowski to anyone else trying to fill those shoes is going to be felt. But not only do you have Cam Brate, you lose O.J. Howard, you bring in a couple of rookie tight ends, Cade Otton, O'Keefe. Cade Otton missed last week's game against Green Bay. Kyle Rudolph made his debut. I don't know why I blanked on his name for a minute. Kyle Rudolph made his debut, had 1 catch and dipped. We didn't see him again week 4, but I felt like Cade Otton coming back. Listen, I don't want to get over dramatic here, but I felt like Cade Otton coming back certainly could have been appreciated, because not only did we see a couple of catches for Cam Brate, Cade Otton had a snag for a first down, I believe, and I know you saw that sideline circus catch from
baby.
Dude, the last person I thought was going to make that catch. Like, when I saw that guy spinning around on the sideline, I don't know who I was expecting, but it wasn't number 41. But what are your thoughts on this tight end room? And then we got a fun question after this.
Well, first of all, O'Keefe got to get out of that 41. That's a fullback.
Oh, my God, dude.
If you're going to be a tight end, man, come on. You got to look the part, baby. Get in 80-something.
I think 86 may be open.
I think the organization transitioned away from the tight end position for this season. You always look at where your allocation of resources is. That's a very inexpensive tight end room, right? Like, you put all their salaries together and, it's not making any noise. They went out and got Julio Jones and Russell Gage. They paid Chris Godwin. So they were saying to me, based on what they actually did, that we're going to be wide receiver centric now that Rob Gronkowski is gone. So that was what, I took from what they actually did as an organization, is that in the red zone, we're going to utilize the size of Julio and Mike, and then we're going to add Russell Gage on the inside to Chris Godwin and kind of get that middle of the field expertise and talent that Gronk gave us.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing is Cameron Brate actually left that game with a concussion. He was put in concussion protocol. So Cade Otton had 3 catches for 29 yards last night. He might be the starting tight end. He and Kyle Rudolph may be the guys that the Bucs look for against Atlanta if Cameron Brate can't go, especially with what's happening with Tua and everything right now at the NFL. I don't think the Bucs really want to take any chances, so it wouldn't surprise me to see Cameron Brate sit this one out. But I mean, you're right. They definitely, I think, sort of changed. Cameron Brate's making a good bit of money, but like I don't think the Bucs were expecting Cameron Brate to suddenly be Rob Gronkowski. And you're right about the depth at receiver that they added and what they were planning to do with that. And I think the Bucs have gotten a little bit more out of their tight ends the last 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks, they were getting absolutely nothing in the receiving game out of those guys. Now they're getting a little bit more, and I think it's helping the offense. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's going to be these receivers that are the ones that are driving the bus here for this offense.
I thought Cade actually looked good in the past
Mm-hmm.
game. I haven't watched the run cut-ups. I didn't think he looked that bad. And let me just say this about the concussion thing. I mean, people get in this outrage, but what's the answer?
Mm-hmm.
Like, take Tua, for instance. Okay, what are you going to say? What's the time frame? Because basically, I just think this is something that's going on to appease the fan base and the public, right? Because if Tua says he's ready to play, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a neurologist. Like, who's to say he's not? And if you say he has to miss a certain amount of time, when he comes back, he's still back in the car race. And the car race has car crashes. It's like if you were in like a serious car accident and you had head trauma and you went through rehabilitation and you worked your way all the way back. But then you got in another car crash and the impact was the same. Like, what happened? So, like, that's the thing with Cameron Brate, with Tua. When we talk about a guy had a concussion, why did they put him back in? Okay, so what's the time period before you're comfortable with them going back in? And then when they go back in, football is a violent physical game, right? The collisions are going to reoccur, so that's just the part about that I don't really have an answer for. And I'm the kind of person, I'm not going to go protest in front of, your office building unless I have like a solution to what I'm protesting about. So what is the proper time when a person, looks concussed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that the NFL is trying to figure out, honestly, because they a lot of times they don't seem to have answers for it, and the whole Tua situation, I think, is really bringing to light a lot of things that the NFL is going to be trying to do differently. So,
Well, and it's something that eventually they're going to have to figure it out. Are we ever going to get 100% of the answers? Probably not. I mean, with so much as technology and reading people's brain scans and things like that go, we still got a long ways to go. But just like Evan had alluded to, this whole Tua thing has really brought to light a lot of people who may not have cared about this before. And I know that none of those people are doctors, and that's where it kind of gets to the point where you have to wade through all of the angry, emotional takes on Twitter from people who have never watched or stepped foot on a football field before. But I do think the NFL is going to be more motivated this year than in years past to really just try and get as ahead of this thing as they can. And for the next season, at least, it's just going to feel like this stuff is under a microscope, because now, especially with things playing out, and then J.J. Watt coming out in the same week saying, hey, I had to get my heart shocked back into place so I could come out here and, bang my head. It's been a wild week for medical takes around the NFL, but they are definitely motivated to get this thing taken care of more than they were, it seems, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, and listen, football's a choice. That's why it's not for everybody. Like, when I coached, I was like, people would come up to me, I want my son to play football. I was like, well, listen, people don't choose football. Football chooses people. Because when you get out there and you see that, okay, yeah, this is, people stepping on my feet, people hitting me in the back.
These guys are hitting each
other. People hitting me in my head. Like, that is part of the game. And I am super, sensitive to the long-term issues that can occur, from consistently hitting each other. But again, let's just say Dolphins say Tua's out for a month. Tua comes back in 5 weeks from now and gets slammed to the ground in the third quarter and looks concussed again. Is it he never plays again? Is it he out for another month? You see what I'm saying? So it's that every situation is different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how you respond and react. It's just like in any other kind of injury in any other part of life. Like, you know, some people can sprain their ankle and fight through it. You know, Paul Pierce, I think, sprained his ankle and they had to get a wheelchair, you know, to get him off the court. So, I mean, like, it's different from person to person. Like, so there is no answer to it, to be honest. I mean, unless you're going to tell a guy, if you get a concussion, you can't ever play again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would be the only fail-proof solution. And that's not, to me, a viable solution to take somebody's, you know, ability to earn a living away. So,
right.
I mean, then it's up to the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know what I'm risking, but I got my heart restarted. But, I mean, now it's up to the individual.
Yeah, there is definitely a certain threshold to consider as far as, like, you know, let's just bring up Aaron Donald, for example. I know he hasn't been making all the same noise this season that he normally does, but he's still a dominant player in the NFL, one of the best defensive linemen of the modern era. Are you going to tell an Aaron Donald who is juiced up, ready to go in the locker room, that he's not going to be playing today because some guy on Twitter said he shouldn't be out there? Like, I do feel like that there is a certain level of self-responsibility that some of these players take on, and that just comes with the territory. And unfortunately, all of these people who are incredibly opinionated, like, you're not going to stop that guy from going out there and, like you said, earning his livelihood. Like, these guys are trying to pay their bills, take care of their family.
Hey, Evan, he talking about Aaron Donald having a big game. 49er fans going to be all up in red DMs if he go out there and have a big game. They're going to say, you woke him up.
Oh, man. I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited to watch that game because, like, you know, San Francisco always kind of gets the better of LA at some point in the season. I don't know if it's going to be beginning of the year, the end of the year, the playoffs, maybe, if Jimmy G is able to play well enough to, you know, walk them into the playoffs. But that'll be an interesting matchup as well.
I know it's a Bucs podcast, but Jimmy G is a great example of timing. Just timing. Like, he was the most popular person in all of San Francisco when Trey Lance was in Chicago in a monsoon, missing wide open guys. And then when he played that first game, I mean, and played good, I mean, all the Garoppolo support was, extend him. We should have never drafted Trey. And then he ran out the back of the end zone. You bum.
It's a week-to-week thing in the NFL, ain't it? Yeah, you can be a hero one week and a villain the next.
Man.
So we got.
I tell people all the time, the hardest thing about being a professional player in a league like the NFL is Monday through Saturday having to listen to people have an opinion about you, especially when it's a negative one. Because like in basketball, baseball, you got another game tomorrow.
Yeah,
you can erase that memory. You have a bad game in football now. Hey, it's 6 days before you play again most of the time.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. We got a few more questions here as we wrap things up. One more about the tight end room. We can keep this one brief because I'm going to be honest, this is a question that we're going to have to answer every 3 or 4 weeks, it seems like. But our buddy Synergy_NL, when is Gronk coming back? We just talked a whole bunch about the tight end position, the blockers who are trying to fill the shoes of big number 87. But a lot of people still think it's a foregone conclusion. He is going to return to Tampa Bay at some point this season to chase another Super Bowl with Tom Brady. What do you think? Are we still in the thought process of, like, maybe there's a chance he comes back? Because I know that there's a lot of football left, but as time goes on, like, I still have my doubts. I think he's done.
Well, the thing with Gronk is Gronk's a transcendent celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, within your sport, you want to become an all-star if it's basketball or baseball. You want to become a Pro Bowler if it's football. Next, it's, can I become an iconic player for a particular organization? Ring of Honors, jersey retired. Thirdly is, can I be so good that I get into the Hall of Fame so they remember me forever? Yet, as many great players that are in the Hall of Fames, not very many of them extend outside of their particular sport. Gronk is transcendent. Like, Gronk's the kind of guy goes to Vegas, they put him on the marquee, Rob Gronkowski hosting at Pure or Marquee, and like average people that don't watch football are like, I want to go hang out, party with him. He's a guy when corporations are having meetings about what big celebrity do we want to market our and promote our brand, Gronkowski's in those conversations. So because of that level of celebrity, he's never coming back, guys, because he can make more money outside of football than he would coming back to play football. You know what I'm saying? So for him, I mean, his on-field accomplishments, he's made Pro Bowls. He's going to be in the Patriots Ring of Honor, whatever they have there. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. You know, so he's done everything you can do in football. I mean, it's on to the next for him. I mean, have you bought those shoes that he's promoting?
I have not.
I haven't seen them. Are they hideous?
No, like, they look like the shoes you would wear with a suit if you don't want to wear dress shoes.
Okay.
Like, so, I mean, he's got a bunch of stuff going on. You know, I heard there's some kind of TV show or something coming. Like, so Gronk living his best life.
Unfortunately, we got to sit through another season of those USAA commercials. Those are the worst, man.
But think about a football player getting that commercial.
Right.
Like, he's a A-list celebrity. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's big time.
I feel like you've seen some other guys, most of them Hall of Famers, but like I think about, you know, Nick Saban and the Aflac commercials. I know that's not quite NFL, but another guy who maybe has some other ventures waiting for him after he, you know, retires, which I don't think he ever will.
Saban's the most recognizable college football coach in history.
Yeah. But does he have a friendly enough face to put on like Pepsi bottles like Gronk does? Because
that's why they got Dion next to him.
Yeah, that is
you
true. You know, I was standing at
Dion there.
We'll wrap up with this. I was standing in line at the gas station the other day, and there was a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos, and Deion Sanders, a player who has not touched the field in a good while, is right there, Dallas uniform and all. I don't know why, but like there are those guys that definitely stand the test of time. I remember there was a time where you could get Peyton Manning themed Gatorade, like his last few years in Denver. There are some guys. Peyton is definitely one of them in a bunch of insurance commercials, but Rob Gronkowski certainly achieved that next level celebrity status. We're gonna ask you the same question again in 3 weeks. So I know you just told I know you just told everybody he's not coming back.
He's not.
We're gonna have another mailbag question here in 3 or 4 weeks. Somebody else is gonna ask, hey, you know, the tight ends aren't averaging 110 yards a game. Should we consider bringing in Rob Gronkowski?
And listen, I'm going to say this for all of the Bucs fans out there. You guys better enjoy Tom, because the chances of Tom coming back next year are probably 0. So, like, it doesn't feel like this is Tom's last year. You know, sometimes when you get used to something, which the fan base is now, you know, used to having a 7-time Super Bowl champ, 3-time MVP as their quarterback, the light at the end of that tunnel is pretty bright. So we better enjoy every moment we get with Tom Terrific, galvanized. I mean, he went to the cemetery and dug the Bucs franchise up out of the ground because, man, we were in the casket. We were done. We were left for dead, and he brought us back. So I just like to say, you know, publicly and give him his flowers while he's still our quarterback, because, man, can you think about us without Tom?
It'd be a lot different.
And we're going to be too good to get Bryce or CJ or, you know, even Will Levis. So, I mean, I guess Blaine Gabbert, here we go.
Hey, I'm on Team Minshew, man. I don't know if you've looked at the list of free agent quarterbacks, but Gardner Minshew. Listen, you look back at the stats, you check out the box scores, you look at the film, and you tell me a time that Gardner Minshew stepped in a game and just absolutely floundered for a team.
I'm a big Gardner Minshew fan. Anybody that sleeps in a trailer adjacent to their workout facility in the off season, I've actually met him a couple of times. He's a cool dude too. But I mean, I don't wish him coming here following Brady. I mean,
it's heavy expectations. But listen, if you need a franchise guy who can play
franchise guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
That's your equivalent of Uncle Rico.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's got he's got something that you want to see him get an opportunity. I mean, he was pretty slightly above average at Jacksonville, when he got the chance to play, and he wasn't really surrounded by a supporting cast. So I see why Rhett likes him, but I'm with you, Evan. I'm not the kind of guy that puts franchise on something until I've seen it be franchise-ish.
Well, that's fair. But I'm telling you, this time next year, Minshew Mania is going to be running wild in Tampa Bay.
You got to get your mustache like his if it happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, with all of that being said, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire podcast with Shaun King. Thank you so much for your time today. Where can people check out your content and follow you on social media?
I'm on Twitter at Real Shaun King. I'm on Instagram at Coach Shaun King. More importantly, I have a television show filmed out here in the great city of Las Vegas on the VSiN network. That's VSIN. You can catch that on YouTube television. It's on Fubo. It's on Hulu. Also, you can download the VSiN app and listen for free. Or for a small subscription, you can watch my beautiful face from 3 to 6 Pacific, Monday through Friday.
Check out our podcast on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily, the #1 Bucs fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You had a pretty interesting article drop today, no?
No, not yet.
Okay. Don't let me give anything away.
Yeah, not yet. But
okay.
If you're talking about the one that I think you're talking about, that dropped on Friday. So.
Oh, okay. So it dropped before the game then.
Yeah.
We'll tell people what they can read since we don't have to keep it a secret.
Yeah, you can read just my opinion on whether or not the Buccaneers, and again, this could be something that, just like the Gronkowski thing, you could probably ask yourself again in about 2 or 3 weeks, but on whether or not the Buccaneers should consider adding Odell Beckham Jr. To their roster. So I take a look at that and some of the pros and cons of potentially signing him. So just check that out on BucsNation.com.
Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out this week's podcast. We will talk to you on Friday for the Week 5 game previews. We take a look at this week's contest between the Bucs and the Marcus Mariota-led Atlanta Falcons. Should be a good one. The winner takes the South, just like we all drew it up. I'm your host, Rhett Matthews, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish and Shaun King. We will talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.